Hello, party people. My name is Krista Keough, and you're listening to Granted, the podcast that puts the fun in funding. Today we're in the studio with the incredible T. Thomason. T began his music career as a young preteen, growing up in rural Nova Scotia. With the release of his first 3 albums, he garnered a long list of awards. He moved to Toronto to write and record new material, and in February this year, T. Thomason won CTV's The Launch, and his fame literally skyrocketed to international heights. I'm excited to catch up with T and get to know his thoughts on funding, so let's do it. All right. Thank you so much for being here with us today, T.
It's great to be here.
You know, I feel genuinely lucky to have known you for a long time. I met you early on in your career, and I worked with you when you were just starting out. And then we reconnected when you were coming back from Toronto because you had gone there to write and record some new music. And now you're in a whole other place. So I want to talk about that. But first, I wanted to touch on when you started, for people who don't know about the early stages of your career. Mm-hmm. So you started writing and recording music when you were in junior high and high school. And from what I could see, people in the music industry here in Halifax and the East Coast and even in Toronto started paying attention early on. You were very young. You were very talented. You had a ton of conviction that you were going to make music and be an artist. That had to be challenging for you, though, because you were still in school, and then you're managing the release of your first record. So how did you deal with all of those responsibilities as such a young person?
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about that the other day, and because I had an interview question that said, when did you decide to have a career in music? And that first record, I don't think I wasn't really thinking of it as, oh, okay, I'm going to have a career now and I'm going to put this out and this is how you do that and this is how it works, because I just had no idea. And my parents were helping me for the most part with that record, actually entirely with that record, and they had no idea. Like, they're actors and writers and directors, but they're not in the music scene. So we were, just sort of doing it for fun. And we did, and I got funding for that record. So it wasn't like, it's not like my parents paid for it, and so they were like, it has to be done right, or so I mean, from what I remember, we did it really small. We booked a show at the Bauer Theatre in Antigonish because that's where I was living at the time, and we ordered the CDs, however many, 500 or 1,000 CDs or whatever, and I had some friends in the high school do some T-shirt designs, and we got those done, and then I did the concert, and we put it out, and it's funny because it was just so long ago that I don't really remember how the rest worked out. I know I was doing some shows, and I went and did some radio appearances and interviews and stuff, but I think a lot of those things were pretty local, and a lot of them were just word of mouth, people hearing about me and then contacting my parents and asking.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your mom, you mentioned Shelley, she is very active in film and theater and things in the arts. And so that makes sense that she was a big supporter. And I remember her being a big part of your career at that time. You released Beauty Queen and Columbus Field then with a management team, and you had an agent, and that all came together for you. How involved were you in making the decisions for your career at that time when you have a team?
At that time, I definitely not as involved as I am now. I think, still pretty involved just because of my personality. I'm very neurotic. Okay. And I need to know everything. So I'm sure that was really annoying for the people working with me at the time.
Well, I didn't have a lot. I remember we would have kind of the start of, okay, we've got this record, this is the idea, this is what the music is sounding like. But I was the one writing your grant. So did you ever see were you involved in grant writing during that time?
I wasn't really involved in grant. I think I got the marketing plans after, but I didn't have as much interest in that side of it at the time, I think if I had, I don't think anyone would have had any problem with kind of like updating me a little more or having me be a bit more involved. But when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, you don't, I didn't have any concept of how important that stuff was and how it all really happened. And all I knew is that, suddenly I had people who were, finding money for me to do things that I couldn't do before, and that was great. But, and I'm sure that at the time things were explained to me and whatever, but it's like you don't retain that stuff when you're that age, like not when you don't have an understanding of the bigger structures behind it,
right.
Which I had to really like commit to learning about. So I'm definitely a lot more involved now than I was.
And it sounds like you had an idea of what the process was like because you applied for funding for your record through the Static. So you had done it once, and so you were familiar with, okay, you write the application, the plan, then you submit and get money. So letting someone take over for that is kind of a natural thing when you have a management team. And so as long as things were running smoothly, it's good.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, even with Through the Static, like my mom wrote that grant, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure I was involved, but like again, I would have been 13.
Wow.
So I didn't even know grants existed. And she was like, okay, we're going to apply here, and I'm sure that I had something to do with it. I don't really remember, but it was a lot of help from her. And so when Jones & Co. became involved, it was a lot of kind of handover more so from my parents to them. And then, I was really more focused on the creative, like pretty much the creative stuff at that time.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
That is nice. Okay. So was 2016, is that when you went to Toronto?
Yeah, I moved to Toronto in 2012.
Oh, wow.
I went to Toronto to go to university.
Right.
And then I dropped out and then stayed there until 2016. And Columbus Field came out in 2014, and then life happened in between then.
Yeah. And so during that time, it was after Columbus Fields, definitely, and then you decided to switch things up. Mm-hmm. And so you changed your management team, and you were in Toronto, and you reconnected with producer David Henriquez. Am I saying his last name right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you two had a really special relationship. Mm-hmm. So what can you tell me now? I'm picturing you in Toronto. You're very much an independent artist at this point. Mm-hmm. You're going to be making music, or you want to. It sounded like that was different than your other music that you're making. So, tell us about that time.
Yeah, well, in that time, like my personal life shifted a lot. I started testosterone hormone therapy and changed my name and changed my pronouns and just rejigged a lot of things personally and rejigged a lot of things professionally as well. So through that time, I was kind of working on the music of my EP, Sweet Baby, with Dave. And we were just doing it really slowly because Dave was basically doing it for nothing because there wasn't really any money at that time. And, leaving my management company and starting new, it wasn't like I, jumped into a new management relationship. It was just me by myself, was a big learning curve. And, the way that we actually funded that EP to end up releasing it and all that was that I won a Jack Daniels competition.
What?
Where they had like $7,000 and they every year would pick an artist to donate it to, and help them with their career goals. And so, you had to like make a video and then get people to vote for you and stuff.
Like Jack Daniel's The Drink?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So they were the first funders of Thomason.
Very nice. I like that.
Yeah.
And then where did the casino residency fall in? Was that later? Yeah. That was an award type thing that I would suspect probably helped give, financially speaking, a bit of a boost.
Yeah. So Sweet Baby was released in 2016, and then I moved back to Halifax, and I actually went in and was a runner-up, or was one of the top 5 in the Casino Nova Scotia, Music Nova Scotia Artist in Residence competition that year, I think. Yeah. I can't remember. It's all blurring together. But I tried it one year and didn't get it. Devaro won that year, and then the next year went in for it again, and then was named Artist in Residence. That would have been 2018. So yeah, I don't know. All the dates are blurring together. But yeah, that was amazing, because by the time I was kind of coming around to that was when I wanted to start releasing stuff from my new record, like Bliss and Loser, and was kind of moving forward from Sweet Baby. So I had to find like the next round of funding to start putting that stuff out. Yeah,
and that's what I wanted to talk about too, because that's you and I connected when you were coming to Halifax, and we met because you wanted to talk about grant writing. You had some of your recordings. I listened to a couple songs, and I love them. I still do.
Thanks.
But you were kind of putting together your own independent team. Like you had David was in your corner, Keough Records, which is an influential music label started by Ray Spoon. You had a publicist lineup. You had a radio tracker. And so with all of that, your new team and your new plans for this EP release, you wanted to apply for funding. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many applications that have gone into this project over the years, because this project has been in the works for probably like 3 years. And, there's been, I did an Indiegogo campaign and raised some money there. And then there was, there's been several Factor applications and Music Nova Scotia applications. And yeah, it's just been going on for a long time, and the team around it has changed like as it's gone on. So when we got together, I think I had briefly been working with a manager from the States, and that relationship didn't go forward. Yeah, and they had written an application for the juried sound recording program at Factor, and that hadn't been accepted, but it had been like 2% or something away from being accepted. So I think we tweaked that and submitted it, and that was the second of 4 times that I've applied and been rejected.
What?
Yeah.
No.
So I
didn't know.
I'm about to submit again for that program for the same project. So it's been going on for a long time.
Where is that at now with your plans? With each time that you submit an application, right? You have one plan. And then if you don't get the funding, it influences how you move forward. So how has it impacted, going after that funding multiple times?
Yeah, I think it's, it's really, it's been really emotional. I think the only time I've punched a wall has been not getting the JSR for like the 4th time. Yeah, and but that's okay. I was like, that was really silly because I could have broken my hand, and that's
that's
we're not
a bad
here for
thing.
That.
No,
so, yeah, but it's emotional. It's stressful because of the deadlines and all that, and it's like it forces you. It's good, but also stressful because it forces you to like have a plan, and go out and get people on the team that you want and put it all together. And the deadlines can be stressful if you're not prepared, or if you're really busy, or which I can be both sometimes, and everybody can be both. So that's something to be aware of like well in advance. And just like the little ins and outs where it's like if you submit this application after you've incurred expenses, like those expenses are not eligible anymore. So you have to be like really mindful of that and make sure that that application gets in, even if it's before the deadline, just that it gets in before you start incurring costs, you know? So those are things that I've learned like over time, and they all make sense. Like it's fine, you know, it's not like these bodies are necessarily intentionally trying to screw you over, but it's just like each funding body has its own specific rules, and it's really important to make sure that you know about them, because it can just add stress to something that's already going to be a lot of work, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a lot of work. And so what surprised you the most when you started writing grants for this upcoming record?
Mm-hmm. I think what surprised me was how sometimes, especially with the Factor JSR, there's just like a lot of opinions about what they're looking for, and there's people, you know, out there kind of making money off of guessing what they want. Not like grant writers necessarily, but I guess not all grant writers, but some grant writers, where they give you the impression that they're like, I know exactly what they're looking for, and then you go and implement that and you still don't get it, and that can be really frustrating. Like I remember I was given the advice that like you have to hire a graphic designer and like have the whole thing like graphic designed, like not just like don't just submit like a document, like, you know, like a piece of paper with the right, but like you gotta have pictures in there and have it be like branded.
I've seen those. They look beautiful.
Yeah,
it's like a whole presentation. It's like full bleed photos.
Yeah,
but it's really hard to edit.
Yeah,
those documents because if they're yours, you need to like have Photoshop or Illustrator or something to get in. So.
Yeah, and it's like, so you have to hire a graphic designer to do that, and then it's like that's, you know, another $250 or however much, and like. Then there's the grant writer, and then so you end up spending all this money, and then not necessarily, and then still not getting the grant by like 2%. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think like the graphic design thing like really surprised me, because you're just like, well, if I'm just like spending all this time writing this plan, and the plan is really good, but yet people are not going to read the plan unless it like looks good. What is the, like, it's just really, you know, but I mean, that's the music industry for you. Like, it's kind of like, it's kind of like that in a lot of ways. So, that was surprising to me, was that like, even just the look of the grant application could have an impact on the outcome. I'd never heard that before. So
yeah, it's surprising, and it's also something that's a fairly new trend, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea would be like, you know, you want to make a good impression, and you want people to be engaged, like you said, to read the full plan. But I still think that the plan itself is what should be considered the most, not necessarily how it looks. And especially for artists who are emerging like you once were, who have really no idea what the finished product looks like.
Yeah.
And they're going for it to hold that high of a standard, like, you know, and John and I actually talked in our episode too about how the quality of these applications is so high. And so it gets to be super competitive. So what about the province? Did you get support from any provincial funders throughout this as well, like to do showcasing or to do smaller projects?
Yeah. My first couple records were funded through a stream that I don't think exists anymore, through Community Culture and Heritage.
Yeah.
They had, I don't remember what it was specifically, but
the Emerging Music Business Program.
Yeah, that was great, and I got some great support through them, and so yeah, that doesn't exist anymore though, as far as I know, and now it's all through Music Nova Scotia, and I've been super fortunate to be funded by them a couple times. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
through this podcast, I've been learning about a bunch of different kinds of funds too. So I'll have to share some links with you afterwards.
Please. That'd be great.
Actually, Arts Nova Scotia, I'm learning a lot more about them, and they have a couple really good programs for creation, which I just learned about through the Remix Project, which is actually based in Toronto. Yeah, they came here and did a panel.
Yeah, it's funny. I reached out to Arts Nova Scotia because I think it's might not. Don't quote me on this. I don't know. I think it's Arts Nova Scotia, or it might be the province in a different capacity, but they have some kind of like creative fund specifically for kind of like marginalized communities.
Yes, the Arts Equity Fund.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they don't consider trans people to be a marginalized community though. So that's really frustrating.
What?
Just saying. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I sent an email being like, so, is it like, you know?
That's kind of one of the ones I had in mind too. And they
Yeah.
have a grants to individuals that you can. So
No.
why do you, what did they give you a reason why?
I'd have to look up the email, but no, it was just
Nothing.
like at this time, like, you know, it's not considered to be one of the populations that we serve with this grant or something. I can't remember.
Yeah,
exactly what it
something
was.
like that.
Yeah.
That's really strange. I hope they change that. I don't understand why that would be. Yeah. That's very confusing.
Yeah.
So, okay. So in February this year, so many things changed
Oh, yeah.
for you.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Remember that time you were on CTVs Alive?
Yeah, yeah.
Like you won that? That was a huge surprise for your
Yes.
fans that you were even on that show.
Yes, yeah.
When did you record it? Can you tell us this sort of how it started, when you recorded it, and how long you had to keep it a secret? That's part of what I want to know.
Totally, yeah. So, I mean, I like learned about the launch in the first season, like with the rest of the country, and thought it was a really cool concept. And you know, in the back of my mind was like, maybe like I'll do that someday. And then, you know, I was kind of skeptical about it because it's reality TV, and you just like never know, and right. So I was kind of like, I don't know. But I was at Canadian Music Week, obviously not this past May, but the one before, and there was a panel about the launch, and a lot of the people who are kind of in the behind-the-scenes team were speaking, and so I went and saw that, and as I was waiting to go in, I was kind of trying to decide if I was going to go, because I was pretty tired, and I saw this guy walk into the hotel lobby at the Sheraton in Toronto where it was being held, and his name was Fraser Hill, and I actually knew him because he'd been coming to Nova Scotia Music Week for years. Like since, you know, the first record, you know, Through the Static when I was 14, he was at my showcase at Music Nova Scotia and was around a couple of years because he used to work for EMI Records. And so I recognized him and jumped up and said hi, and I was like, you probably don't recognize me, but like, this is who I am, whatever. And he was like, oh no, like, yeah, I know who you are. And introduced me to the woman, Kate Davies, that he was with. And I said, well, what are you guys doing? And they were like, oh, we're going to talk on a panel about the launch. Like, we're working at the launch now. And so I was...
What? That's so cool.
Yeah. So I was immediately like, oh, okay, like, I'm going to go watch. Because I've always liked Fraser, and he's just always been like a great guy and does good work. So I was like, okay, if he's involved, he actually knows the music industry. This is interesting to me, you know, even more now. So I'm going to go. So yeah. And they said, you know, we'd actually been like just looking at your stuff and talking about how you'd be a great fit for the show and whatever. So that was cool. And then they came to my showcase at CMW later that night and said to me, like, yeah, you should really apply. Like, we think you'd be a great fit. So I sent in my application that summer, and then last August, heard that I'd been accepted to the show, and then went to film it in Toronto in October.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we filmed in October, and then had to wait until February for the episode to air.
That's incredible. What was going through your mind when you knew that the episode was going to air? Did you imagine what happened?
I don't know. It's so weird because it's like you went and filmed it, and it was a really great experience. And, you know, I forget how many days it was, but it's like you're in a hotel for however long, and you have people really like looking after you and running and getting you, you know, food and drinks and whatever, and it's a very different experience. Then I came home and I was like working in a flower shop for Christmas. So like,
amazing.
It's like a very different, it's like, so you almost come home and it's almost like you feel like, did that actually happen? Yeah. Like, you know, like so strange. Like, yeah. And, so I don't really I think it sort of felt like a dream.
Yeah.
And
wow.
then, and it was it was stressful, you know, because you're just worried. You're like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to come across, you know? And did I just make a huge mistake by like being on reality TV? Like, I don't know, you know?
Oh, that's so interesting.
Like,
yeah, I guess because you don't really know how it's going to look in the end, how the editing's going to be
No. So, yeah, so there were, and I like to be pretty much in control as much as possible. So it's like, Yeah, it's a little it was there were some real stressful like nights leading up to it, but
leading up to the airing of the episode, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, but in the end it was great, you know, and the support was amazing as a result, so yeah.
That's good. I want to know about that support because so the song that you recorded called Hope, it literally became an overnight success. And you did seem to make really good relationships though with the mentors who were on that show. How is that working out for you today? How did that impact your plans?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it made a huge impact, you know, like to be able to make those connections, you know, like Alex Hope is an amazing young producer who produced the song and lives in LA. And so, you know, my goal is to go down to LA, you know, if not this year, very early in 2020 and do some more writing and do some more working with her. And, you know, I'm playing Canada Day at Parliament Hill, and that kind of came together because Mary May, who's one of the mentors from Quebec, her partner is the musical director for the show, and you know, she invited me to come to the Bell Center with her and perform after my episode aired, and so I got to meet him there.
The video was incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so it just meeting people, and then, you know, and then he's doing the Canada Day show, and then he's like, oh, we want tea on the show, you know, so just like that kind of stuff is just sort of like, the nature of this industry where it's just about meeting people and making connections and that kind of thing. And
that is huge.
Yeah.
And so how is this impacting your plans for music and for funding for this record? Is it still the record you want to put out? Mm-hmm. And do you have a better idea now of how you're going to do that? Yeah.
I mean, it is still the record that I want to put out. It's really important to me. Like, we pushed the release of the record to be able to do the TV show. But, you know, from the beginning of any kind of negotiations with them, I said, you know, this record has to come out. And, you know, this was before we knew if I was going to be launched or whatever, right? So I was like, you know, whatever happens, like, this record still has to come out, and I can't be in a situation where, you know, I'm not allowed to put out music or something.
Okay, you're saying that to CTV. Yeah. Like, you're trying to get a sense of, like, what am I obligated to you for going forward?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And they were, like, very understanding, and, like, you know, the show, they want to support artists, and they want, you know, any artist that comes out of that show, whether they're launched or not, like, they want them to continue to make music and thrive, right? Because they're picking those artists because they like what they do. Yeah. So they were really understanding of that. And I think, you know, it did change. There's some tracks that Dave and I are kind of reworking because we want to bring them a little closer to, like, the pop sphere. The record was, you know, when we did it, was sort of a blend of, like, pop and rock, and, like, bringing, you know, what I had been doing into a new area. But, you know, the sound of Hope and the production on Hope is very much like where I want to continue to go, and just kind of, like, accelerated that change. So we want to make sure that the record is, like, pretty caught up with that sound. And then in terms of funding, like, I'm still going to be, I just put in a Music Nova Scotia funding application for help with marketing, and I'm about to put in a JSR application yet again. And we will see. Like, we will see what happens.
How will you have a huge party when you get it? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
if I get
so
it,
anticlimactic. Yes, please call me and let me know.
I'll feel like fifth time's a charm.
Yeah, that's right.
No, it's hard though, because you just don't know. Like, you don't know who else is applying, and there's so many unknown factors, and you can't and you can't control it. It's a bit of a lottery. There's no point in, like, getting angry or taking it personally, or, you know, because, like, there's other things to do. You just have to move on to the next application. Yeah, that's a really good attitude for sure. My last question is something that I'm just curious about myself. You call your fans sweet babies.
Yeah. And you call yourself Sweet Baby T. And when one of your recordings is a voicemail from your mom calling you Sweet Baby T. So where does that come from?
I think I had a group of friends who just started calling me that when I started going by T, because it was like a new thing to be going by T. So I was like a little baby. So
I see. Yeah. Okay. And so when you use that term with your fans, like, it kind of reminds me of Lady Gaga's Little Monsters, right? There's this community of people who are your sweet babies, and it's got this cute acronym and stuff on socials. Cute. Do you feel like people are catching, like, are people into that online and stuff catching on?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like people, I kind of started doing it because people started saying it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, to me, it was just like the name of my EP.
Yeah.
And then like some of my friends would call me that. And then I started seeing people kind of posting things or like making reference to it in that way. So I was like, all right, we'll run with it.
That's adorable. So for all the sweet babies who are listening, who are making music and applying for funding and maybe feeling sometimes frustrated the way you were and then elated to get it and things, what would you say to them?
I say definitely don't punch a wall when you don't get your funding. No, I would say, you know, like it takes a lot of time and it can feel really frustrating because you're like, I should be writing music, I should be being creative. But I think it can be really fun to look at the grant applications and look at the plans as a creative thing, because you're outlining, you know, how you're going to get out there and make an impact. And that's really exciting. You know, you're writing it, you know, it gives you a chance to tell your story and to outline why your music is going to make a difference in the world. And I think that should be exciting, and it shouldn't be, you know, kind of seen as like a weight on your shoulders or like something you have to do. It's like, yeah, you do have to do it. That's a part of this career. If you don't want to do it as a career, you can do it as a hobby. So, you know, but I think it is really exciting to look to the future and look to how you can get out there and make an impact. So that's the attitude and the approach that I try to take for funding.
That's awesome.
Makes it easier on your head.
Yeah, it would. And it makes more sense too, because I think a lot of the huge highlights you've had so far really didn't have to do with funding. They had to do with you, well, sort of in the same vein, what you need to do with funding, like you're saying, you have to put yourself out there. But you've put yourself out there in so many different ways. So it's been interesting to see how things have come together.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm so excited for what's to come for you too. Like, I can't wait. This record is exciting, and just everything you're going to do this summer too.
Thanks.
And thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yay.
Yay. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen to podcasts so you never miss a new episode of Granted. Produced by Krista, Keough and John Mullane at John's Studio in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Follow us on social media. We are at Granted Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and you can follow us on Twitter at Granted_podcast.